Howdy gang, and welcome to your 6th OAuth tutorial, and in this video we're going to look at the Google strategy and how we can set up the Google Plus API to use it inside our project. Alright then, so in the last video we imported these two dudes right here, Passport and Google Strategy, and we started to set up Passport to use a new Google Strategy, and we said that this object right here needs to take some options to configure it. We also passed as a second parameter to Passport.use this callback function, which we're going to talk about at a later point in time. For now, let's focus on these options we need to place right here. So when we're setting this up to use a new Google strategy, what we're essentially saying is we want to use the Google Plus API to authenticate people on our website using Google, right? So we're using the Google API behind the scenes. Now, in order for us to do that, we're going to need a couple of different things, a client ID and a client secret. Now, they're two of the things that are going to go in here. So how do we get them? Well, first of all, we need to go to the developers console at Google. So that's console.developers.google.com. And you'll need a Google account to do this. So if you've not got one, create one. And you'll need to create a project on this developer console to enable the Google Plus API so that we can use it in our project. So I've already selected this project, Ninja OAuth test. If you've not got one, this should be a plus sign, or if it's a drop down arrow, just click that and click the plus over here to create a new project, give it a name and press create. So once you're in your project here, we need to enable the Google Plus API for it. So click on this enable APIs and services, and we want to look for the Google Plus API, which is the top one right here. And when this loads up, you'll see it says accessing user data with OAuth 2.0. This is what we're going to be doing. So we have our application, which is going to use Passport and the Google strategy to authenticate our users. It's going to send them to the user consent screen, then grab the user data. Okay, makes sense? This is what we need to use. So let's click on enable. So this will just take a couple of seconds, then redirect you to your dashboard. Okay, so once that's enabled, you'll see this screen right here, and it says at the top, to use this API, you may need credentials. Click Create Credentials to get started. So let's do that. Let's click Create Credentials. And which API are you using? Well, it is the Google Plus API, so we'll leave that as is. Where will you be calling the API from? Well, we're going to be calling it from a web server on Node.JS, so let's select that one. What data will you be accessing? We're going to access the user data. So let's click on the button to go forward. We need to give these credentials a name. So I'm just going to call this my client. You can call it whatever you want. And then down here, authorized JavaScript origins. Where are these requests going to come from? Well, we're serving them from a local host at port 3000. So let's say http:/localhost, and it's port 3000. All right. So I'm going to just copy that, and I'm going to also paste this in the next one, which is authorized redirect URIs. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on. For now, just pop in this address / whatever. All right. So now we need to press create client ID, and that's going to create these credentials for us. Just click, I'll do this later. And then if we click into these credentials now, we're going to see the things that we need. The client ID right here and the client secret. So these are two of the properties we need to pass in to this thing right here. So let's do that now. So if I go over here, I'm going to first of all copy this thing, which is the client ID. So Control C for that one. And we're going to paste that in here. So underneath this comment, I'll say client, and then it's capital I and capital D. Then this is going to be a string, right? So you need to place this thing that we've just copied right here inside quotations here, so that it's a string. So after that, let's place a comma, and the next property is going to be the client secret. So let's go back over here and grab that client secret and paste that in here, again inside a string, like so. Okay, cool. So now we've added the client ID and the client secret to this Google strategy. So when our application starts and Passport knows that it wants to use a Google strategy to authenticate people, this Google strategy is going to say, okay, well, I can do that. I can use the Google API to authenticate users because I've set up some credentials and enabled the API in my project online. Okay, So I'm allowed to do that now inside this application. I can use that API. So they're two of the properties we need inside of this Google strategy. All right, so now we have those two things in. Now imagine at some point when we're creating our project, we're using source control like Git, and we're uploading all of this to GitHub. Now ideally, we don't want people to see these things here, right? So we need a more secure way to store these so that when we upload our files to GitHub, other people can't necessarily see them. So I'm going to show you a better way to store your keys and your secrets in the very next tutorial.